From Troy Public Radio, this is Alabama Aloud. I'm Don Noble. Alabama Aloud is the only podcast where you can hear Alabama stories read in their entirety. Today I'll be reading Bluesville by Anita Garner. Anita Miller Garner received an MFA in fiction writing from the University of Alabama and recently retired after a career of teaching at the University of North Alabama in Florence. She is the author of a short story collection, Undeniable Truths. Bluesville is the fictional name for Florence, home of the W.C. Handy, Father of the Blues, festival held each July. The story, Bluesville, is a fresh take on Edgar Allan Poe's classic, The Cask of Amontillado. Buddy behind the bar pushes a Coke and ice my way. Evening, Mayor. Saturday night in Bluesville. Festival week blurs towards its end. I sit alone at a bar with patrons stacked 3 deep, as I have done all week, hopping from makeshift stages in barbecue joints to city parks to senior centers, shaking hands and soaking up the truest, purest blues known to man. All over the city. Random magic. No-name trios drift together on the spot. Hard-luck nobodies pour their souls into homemade tin guitars and contraptions designed to hold a couple of mouth harps, one on either side of their heads, so that when the mood strikes, and it always does, they can choose between the key of C or key of G, and suck and blow like a wheezy lung, stomping time with one foot, strumming their guitar strings with such force as to loose the calloused burrs on their yellow fingers. I seek out the obscure and authentic, fat, black, mad Mississippi, who has spent most of his life in asylums, Cracker Crawdad Louie, who has spent most of his life in jails, and my favorite on stage tonight, Crazy Mary, with her Janis Joplin wail and Alberta Hunter smile. Sure, there are the headliners in the big arenas, big acts with agents and PR, but these small venues let me press flesh and be a part of the heartbeat. And of course, they offer me the chance I've been waiting for all these years, the chance I've planned for, dreamt of, thought of so much that sometimes I awaken in the middle of the night, dry-mouthed, feeling as though my dark plan is memory already. I've caught 10, maybe 11 acts since the early morning parade. The final day of the festival starts with a group saunter down stately old Court Street, whose Greek Revival facades once boasted the names of the richest jewelry and department stores, but now house art galleries, restaurants, law offices, and after dark, 2 or 3 street people in the shadows. But earlier today, in the hot new light, the parade was a tumble-down, crooked march affair. Grandmas and kids strutted down the middle of the pavement, sporting wide-brimmed straw hats, umbrellas decorated like wedding cakes, and plenty of labs and dachshunds panting in the summer heat beneath fancy bandanas and tied-on party hats. As mayor, I strolled the edges, afterwards visiting all those law office brunches spilling out onto the second-floor balconies overlooking the shifting tableau. When I walked into the foyer of Barnes, Pitts, and Sheehan, I was greeted by a table of picked-over, bite-sized quiches and ham biscuits, a dozen deserted, sweating Bloody Mary glasses standing sentinel on the sideboard. My heart quickened as I spied Loud Harrimore, already flushed and holding court, a drink in his hand. The senior partner's wife, Elizabeth Barnes herself, placed an old straw boater 2 sizes too large on Loud's head, as if crowning royalty. "You may need this before the day's over," she crooned to Loud, leaning over, the scooped neck of her blouse giving Loud a sudden view. As used up and over the hill as Loud is, men are still too eager to laugh at his jokes, and women still plot to get his attention, hoping, no doubt, to show up in some manifestation in Loudon Harrimore's next novel. No doubt thinking, somehow, irrationally, Loud can capture their essence for immortality, as they feel he did for his late wife, Fav. Fav had been the most beautiful girl. In fact, I had dated her early on, took her to the movies, and held her hand when we were kids. By the end, though, the picture was not pretty, ending one wet night when Loud, drinking, lost control at the wheel, Fav dying instantly. People, not just women, are vain. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity, says the preacher. Everyone knows I don't drink anything stronger than iced tea before 5, and Coca-Cola after that. That as mayor of this town for the past 17 years, I am the lifelong husband of one wife, a woman best described in one word: solid. Sarah is solid in her hard work, her unwavering love for God and family, her iron gray hair solid as an anvil on the pillow beside mine each night. Buddy takes my empty glass and puts down a fresh napkin and Coke. Crazy Mary finishes her set with a flourish of white handkerchief and impersonation of Louis Armstrong. The two young guys on bar stools beside me argue. The guys pay their tabs and file out. At a small table near the improvised stage, a couple arises, scraping their wooden chair legs on the rough concrete floor, clearing the way for me to see the brim of a straw boater rise and alight atop a full head of gray hair. Loud Harrimore walks toward the back door, stumbles briefly, steadies himself, and walks out, turning left, away from the river. He's heading home, just as I knew he would. I feel my pulse rise, and soles of my feet tingle with excitement. I calm myself, follow my plan. "Hey, buddy," I call to the bartender. "What's next?" "Nothing here, Captain," he says, loading dirty glasses into a crate, mopping down the bar. "Now, Callahan's across the river. They keep going till midnight. After that, it'll boil down to T-Bones or the Hollywood. But you know that." T-Bone's Grill and the Hollywood Club are both just outside the city limits. Private BYOB clubs that don't have to close up when Saturday night lurches into Sunday morning. Places that don't have to give the city one dime in taxes, yet their drunken fights and domestic disturbances have a way of filtering back into town. I don't make a habit of going to either place, but people everywhere vote. And besides, nothing is off limits to anyone during Blues Week. White folks who normally sit like the upright dead in their own churches on Sunday morning get the spirit and sing and clap in black churches every day of the week during Blues Week. Black folks pour onto the polo fields. Juke joints like T-Bones clean up their lowest down acts for 1 week, opening their doors to the light of day, serving orange crush to kids at noon, while an old man with a worn trumpet and threadbare pants teaches them how to blow without spitting too much. Blues Week is Harmony Week. Wherever you've dreamt of going, you can pretty much go. No one's watching. No one cares. I leave by the front door and calculate my pace. It's dark now, street lights giving the only light, the moon obscured by clouds. I wave to some neighbors, shake a few more hands, then quicken my steps and cut through a cobblestone alley and walk 4 blocks to where I've parked my car, slipping into a nearby small, dark park with the lone bench and overgrown wisteria. I sit in the deep cover and wait. A woman walking a small dog passes, and I fear my plan is once again thwarted. I have been this close twice before, but the third time, they say, is the devil's charm. The woman and the dog are a full block away by the time Loud Harrimore's shuffled steps approach. I let him get close, dead even with me. I see clearly the outline of the silly hat before I speak. Quiet astonishment in my tone. "Why, who's that in that straw boater?" I ask. Pause briefly. "Loudon Harrimore? That can't be you." He stops and turns toward the casual, friendly sound of my voice. Without one trace of fear in this town he feels he owns, he answers. "Who's there?" "Who's sitting back there in that bush?" he asks with the befuddlement of a man who started drinking early and has continued all day into evening. "Come on," I say. "Have a seat. Rest your feet a while." "Oh, it's you, Dave. A man can't be arrested in this town for walking, can he?" I give a small, warm laugh. "No DUI, that's for sure. Not even public intoxication during festival week. Not city policy." He responds to my voice and steps from the sidewalk into the enclave of stone and vine and leaf. "Mind if I join you?" There are 2 more city blocks of old sidewalk between here and Loud Harramore's house, sidewalk buckled by the roots of giant oaks. Sitting down must seem like a good idea. "This damn streetlight's always blown. You'd think the mayor could have that fixed, wouldn't you?" We have a little chuckle over that. We chat quietly about the festival, comparing notes. "I just saw Crazy Mary," I say. "No kidding. Just now, at Buddy's? I was there." We share a brief silence of reverie and appreciation before he speaks. "Crazy Mary. That's what they call moonshine in Brazil, you know. Maria Luca. Crazy Mary." Then I hear the crackle of his smile, lips curling over moist gums, and he corrects himself. "No, I suppose you wouldn't know, would you? No reason for you to know that." Just a little jibe, typical of Loud Harramore's lighter condescension. "I'm mayor, Loudon, not a priest. I may not drink it, but I've seen plenty of moonshine. In fact, I have a mason jar right now down at my camp." He gives a little laugh as if he finds this hard to believe. "You remember when Sam Hurston was leading that task force on drugs? He got this moonshine in a meth bust out at the trailer park. He says it's the best he's seen in 20 years. The real stuff, if you can believe the police in this town." We have another little laugh before he gets serious. "Why are you keeping it down at your camp?" "Sam says pure shine will take old varnish off wood better than turpentine." "Good Lord, man, you wouldn't waste something like that on refinishing a boat paddle, would you?" "What else would I use it for?" I can tell he's thinking. How do you even know it's real moonshine if you've never sampled it? After all, it came from a meth bust. "Well, when you shake it, it forms a bead on top. That could just be lye in it. Old-timers did that, you know." "Well, I'm no expert, that's for sure. But Sam said he's seen this shine on and off all his life, and knows it when he sees it. Says he's seen the still before, an old one the revenuers never found. Hand-forged copper line, real old, not a car radiator or anything like that. Made back before there were any cars. Sam said it probably dates back to the Civil War, maybe even back before that." I can tell Loud's taking the bait. He's exploited everything there is in this town in his quest to tell a story. Published tales best left buried. Exposed us all for the world to see, thinly veiling our lives as fiction. I know he'd love to treat some of his important big city friends to authentic moonshine. He'd probably take them down to the Coondog Cemetery and offer them a sip out of a chipped brown jug and entertain them all by howling at the moon. "I tell you what we need to do, my friend," he says, his voice so conspiratorial as to be almost a whisper. "No," I say, "I can see where this is going. No offense, Loudon, but you've had enough to drink for one day." I get up to leave. And now I see the real Loudon. "Sit down, Dave. If you knew the first thing about drinking, which you don't, you'd realize that a man can drink from morning till night, if he knows what he's doing. He has to space it out, keep drinking the same stuff, and leave off the sugar. Me, I've been drinking bourbon all day since sunup. I could drink some shine right now, this very minute, and it wouldn't bother me at all. I'd still sleep like a baby. The night is still young, my friend. Hours and hours before it's time to find a ride out to the Hollywood." 10 minutes later, I'm opening the passenger door of my old two-seater sports car and helping Loudon Harrimore get in without banging his head, stowing the boater in the storage compartment where the ragtop fits. I'm not even to third gear before he says, "Damn, Dave, I smell gas. Strong. You've got a bad leak somewhere." That's what Sarah keeps telling me, but I can't find it. He uses his haughty tone, the one he learned when he went to boarding school and then to college in Virginia, while the rest of us played football and hoped to get scholarships to the state college so we could major in something practical and acquire a skill we could barter to earn a living. Loudon Harrimore majored in literature and revived Poe's Southern Literary Messenger. He's the big fish in our small pond. I see his droll expression in the pale light of the dashboard. I have a top-notch mechanic. Say the word, and I'll have him look at it for you. So that is how Loudon Harrimore becomes my sudden best friend, and is in my car, headed 12 miles out a dark country road to my deserted fishing camp on a lake on the Tennessee River. At this point, if all I want to do is kill him, I can simply slide his side of the car into the giant sycamore down on Coffee Creek Curve, reaching over right before impact to release his seatbelt, then throw a match on the rising fumes before he has time to regain consciousness. That would probably work, but it wouldn't be fair, and it wouldn't serve the purpose I have in mind. I drive down the long gravel driveway to the lake, and Loudon comments on the height of the tall hardwoods illuminated by the headlights. I park behind the cottage, and we walk in the dark up the stone walk to the porch. Inside, I flip the light switch, but the weak light from the one sconce is absorbed by the dark log walls and stone fireplace. I go to the sideboard and take out 2 crystal old-fashioned tumblers and motion for Loudon to sit down and get comfortable on one of the sofas. Then I disappear to a closet in the back hall where we keep tools and cleaning supplies. I return with an old half-gallon glass mason jar with a zinc lid with white porcelain liner. I set the glasses and the jar down on the table in front of the sofa and pull up a chair. Loudon examines the label on the jar. This reads, "Paint Remover." I don't need a bleeding ulcer. Go ahead, open it up. I put that label on there myself. He shakes the jar and smiles at me when small bubbles form on the surface. He unscrews the lid, sniffs the vapors from the mouth of the jar, and smiles at me again. It doesn't take long for the delicate aroma to drift my way, too. 2 glasses? I wouldn't want you to think I'm trying to poison you. Loudon laughs, as if on stage, and pours 2 fingers of the contents of the jar into each glass and hands me one. He swirls the liquid in the glass and sits there sniffing it as if it were a fine old wine or cognac. He sits back on the sofa and relaxes before he turns his body toward mine. Tell me one more time what Sam told you. I go into all the details again, embroidering the mythology in small increments, toying with Loudon's appetite, like working a crankbait over a weed bed of hungry bass. After he has swirled the liquid around in his glass and sniffed it to his apparent satisfaction, he waits for me to lift my glass to my lips and then lifts his glass in the air in a silent toast. The liquid burns, but I don't blink an eye. When he sees me swallow, he takes his first sip. Maybe it's all the other drinks he's had this day, or maybe the strong fumes of gasoline have dulled his sense of smell, but somehow the concoction I have put together of 100 proof corn whiskey and grain alcohol I bought off the liquor store shelf with a good dollop of the bourbon Sarah has me buy every Christmas for her bourbon balls keeps the smile plastered across the man's face. This has been aged somewhat, maybe briefly, in oak. Initial sourness followed by the sweetness of corn. I'd say it's 100 proof. You got any gunpowder lying around? We could put a teaspoon of this clear nectar in a silver spoon, add a pinch of gunpowder, and stick a lighter to it to see if it's been watered down. Fresh out of gunpowder. Right. Soon Loudon reaches for the mason jar to refill his glass. He doesn't seem to mind that I haven't finished what's in my tumbler, but here again, a sober driver is something he's probably learned to appreciate over the years. He continues his charming good behavior until after the third stiff drink, when he becomes indignant, remembering he hasn't eaten since brunch. In the pantry, I find a tin of stale peanuts in the shell, and we both crack open a handful or two. He seems to approach the edge of tears for a split second before his eyes harden and he begins to pontificate, opening his barrage of words with an accusation. I am amazed that a man so drunk he's sitting bored stiff and pale can loose such an agile verbal volley. I suppose as mayor it would be your duty to dismantle such a still, perhaps even order your strong arms to go in with axes, should you know the exact location of this illegal activity. When I fail to respond, he continues. But then no one around here knows how to promote this area, or develop it, or even preserve what's good about it for that matter. I wonder if the man is still alive who made this. He nods toward the beverage in his glass. Or how many generations deep this art lies. Or if there's anyone still alive to whom he was able to pass on the secrets. I let him go on and on about Zen and the art of making moonshine before I pour a bit more from the mason jar into my own glass for effect. I've seen the still. This gets his attention. Sam Hurston showed it to you? I'm not sure that he's ever seen it. He claims he has, but I don't have proof of that. Then how do you know whether or not you've seen it? Time to set the hook. How can you assume I wouldn't know it if I saw it? Then I concoct, partly from truth, the biggest lie of my life, telling him that near the wildlife preserve on the river, near the cave with the locked chain-link fence covering its mouth, protecting the rare blind fish and brown fruit bats, on one or two occasions when I was walking there, monitoring activities of both vandals and the federal government, I'd noticed a path beaten down in the tall grass and discovered the entrance to yet another, much smaller cave. This cave, I am sure, had been used during the Civil War and earlier by the first people who perhaps used it as a shelter when hunting. The cave is long and narrow, I tell him, but if you are patient and keep going, it opens into a room large enough to hold the still. It was obvious the day I saw it, I lie, that someone had used the still recently and had packed out the finished product. That doesn't make sense, he says. You can't put a still in close quarters like that. A still must be fired, probably with wood. And if there's not enough ventilation, the vapors from the alcohol will hang in the air and spontaneously combust. I'd already thought of that. Oh, that cave has plenty of good ventilation. There must be a small mouth on the other end as well. I've been to the mouth, I discovered many times since, and when the barometric pressure changes, you can hear the cave sing with all that air going in and out over those rocks. When the pressure outside is high, the air rushes into the cave. But when low pressure sweeps through, the air rushes back out again. The room with the still must have a mouth opening to the limestone cliffs on the river's edge. If an old-timer could read the clouds and signs, then he'd know it was going to rain and low pressure was on the way, and the air would rush out. Early in the morning, any smoke from a fire would look just like mist off the river. So that's how they kept from being detected. That's what I think, I say. The fact that it's on the river means that a man could go night fishing in the rain, visit his still, come back after dawn with a few catfish he'd harvested from trot lines, and no one be the wiser. Loudon Harrimore's eyes twinkle. It's close to here, isn't it? I'm not prepared to answer that question. You just did. I act as if I don't know what to say. I'm letting Loudon's manipulative greed steer the course. Take me there. It's an order. You've got to be crazy, I say. It's nighttime. And besides, you've had too much to drink. We've got to get back into town. It's hours until time to go to the Hollywood. You've got a boat, don't you? I keep it tied up down at the dock. And flashlights? I nod. But I can't take you there. Not can't, Loud corrects. Won't. It's night time, Loudon, I say again. I have no business going to that wildlife refuge in the dark. If someone saw me, what would I say? What business could I claim I had out inspecting a chain-link fence in the dark? No one will see you, Dave. Why not? Because you won't use your running lights. You'll turn off your depth finder and anything else that makes noise or light, and we'll wait until we get inside the cave to turn on the flashlights. It's a tough hike. You've had too much to drink. Nothing can change that. Draw a straight line. Tell me to walk it, he says. Then go get your boat key. Loudon Harrimore's vast experience mimicking sobriety comes in handy as I load him and a light pack of gear into the flat-bottomed fishing boat I keep tied to the old wooden dock. I have never craved the fashionable and prefer instead this deserted area as far away from the country club as I can get. I do as he has instructed and leave the running lights off and go straight toward the uninhabited island in the center of the mile-wide lake before turning left and following the edge of the barge canal. I know this river in the dark, could steer it blind, know how to avoid rock rows and stumps according to the water level. My biggest fear is a submerged log, but we are traveling slowly in order to keep the motor as quiet as possible. We head 6 miles upstream, crossing back and forth twice to avoid places where people might still be at this time of night. A boat launch, a dark row of fishing cabins. We pull up to a small island, Smithsonia Light, and I cut the motor and we listen to the lap of waves and a few coyotes in the distance. When I am satisfied that there is no one else around, I start the boat again and cross the river to what's left of an old cotton landing, most of it underwater, for when the lake was flooded back in the 20s. I let the boat drift into a stand of willows before I find a sturdy branch and tie off. Loudon Harrimore stands up before the boat even comes to a steady stop. His whisper is loud, comic. "Help me out of the boat. Steady this thing, will you?" His leather shoes find little purchase on the slick rocks, so that I slip an arm about his waist and practically have to carry him to firm ground. We strike out to the base of the cliff, careful to pick our way through the tall grass and weeds. The climb up the rocks is slow, but not difficult. Loudon sits down frequently on the smooth limestone outcroppings, either to rest or regain his balance. I'm not sure which. Neither of us speaks until I have pushed Loudon into the narrow opening of the cave and crawled in behind him. We cannot stand and have to walk bent over in total darkness. After about 10 yards, the aisle expands enough so that I can comfortably retrieve my backpack and pull out a couple of headlamps. When I shine my light on Loudon, his eyes are wide, as if in fright of the closeness of the tomb-like chasm. I can tell he needs a drink, so I reach back into my pack for a small silver flask I'd filled with Sarah's baking bourbon. I offer it to him, and the look in his eyes changes at once to one of friendship and gratitude. The passage narrows and turns downward, the floor strewn with large rocks, making footing difficult. Loudon slips, then stumbles, letting out a small cry. I catch him and steady him against the wall. "How much further?" he asks. "A good way," I tell him, looking him in the eye. "Only one muddy spot, but plenty of rocks." "There aren't any bats, are there?" "A few, sometimes." I don't lie. "You can change your mind, you know. We can go back right now." He shakes his head, and we continue. We can stand upright easily now. "Do you think they dragged it through here, in pieces? Cobbled it together once they got it there?" "Maybe," I say. "That's one possibility. I've also wondered if there was once another entrance away from the river, one that they dynamited long ago." Loudon starts laughing, at first a chuckle, then louder, the closeness of the walls absorbing the sound. "This is crazy," he says. "What a story this will make." He takes the silver flask out of his back pocket and takes a swallow. We trudge onward and slosh through a damp spot, our headlamps bouncing their weak beams around on the dark rock and dirt. My thighs tire, and my feet and ankles feel bruised from the rough path. When I turn my head to look at Loudon, his eyes seem bleared, and his mouth is slightly open, as if he has begun to breathe hard from exertion. I look down and see his shoes covered in mud. "You don't ever black out now, do you?" I ask, as if joking, remembering seeing him one night carried out like a corpse from a back room of the country club and put into a back seat to be carried home. He raises his chin. "Never, sir," slurring the words. Another 2 steps, and as if to demonstrate his omnipotence, he takes the flask out once more for a long, hard pull, a giant 2-gulp swallow that empties the container and leaves him breathless. I have to screw the top back on for him before I slide it back into my own pocket. Soon we walk through ankle-deep water, but Loudon is a trooper and never complains. When I fear he is about to pass out, I put my right arm around his waist once more to keep him moving forward, taking his left arm and draping it around my neck. "You're a friend," he says, never looking up at me. "Better than you know," I say. When we come to a small alcove about the size of a dislodged boulder, he is dead weight, and I have to hug him with both arms to prop him against the back wall. What happens next is expected. What else at this point? The iron cuffs secured to the rock, the chain and lock, him becoming lucid on and off during the process as I drag the bag of dry cement from the heavy black waterproof drum liner, fetch water from the puddles, mix the mortar, and stack rocks across the opening the size of a cellar door. To his credit, he never once thinks it is a joke. He sees the irony all right, but he knows it is no hoax, no Huck Finn prank to befuddle Jim for amusement. Like Montresor, he does cry out once, loudly, in anger and anguish, but I feel no need to answer his cry like some baboon proving his dominance over the forest. When he speaks, the slur is gone, a new clarity born in his voice. "You'll never get away with it. You're leaving evidence you don't even realize. This is the real world, a small town, not TV. There are all kinds of tests they can do to determine cause of death. By the time they find you, no one will care. You're not Medgar Evers. They'll check your car and find evidence I was there." I don't bother to argue with him. In a week or 2, my rusty old sports car will catch on fire at last, and Sarah will shake her head and then hug me close, glad that she has not lost me to a danger she has warned me of for months. "So what's my motive?" I ask. "Why will I be a suspect?" He is silent as I continue to stack up the rocks in a haphazard fashion. I'm glad he is too far away to kick them out of place when he sobers up. "You were always jealous that I got Favre." I don't go into all the ways that he mistreated her, abused and debased her. I did hear you tell some things you shouldn't have when you were drunk, bragging about what you had her do on Poe's grave when you lived in Richmond. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? That's just the beginning of all the things you need to remember. He continues to talk, and talk fast as I finish piling up the stones and cementing them in place so the coyotes can't get to him. It will take him 10 days to die of dehydration, maybe less. As I hoist up the last 2 stones, he begins talking so fast it's almost gibberish. "Mason jar," he says over and over, laughing out of control, as if it's the funniest thought he'd ever had in his life. Then he is quiet for a second before he blurts out, "Immurement! My God, man, you're Protestant. Surely you can't think this will be my purgatory." I have seen much during my tenure. The elderly in nursing homes, their rotting limbs removed one by one. A young woman dying slowly of the rat poison she swallowed when her son was hit by a car and died in her arms. Death for some comes slowly, giving the dying time to think. After the last stone, I hear nothing for a moment before I hear the long, clear wail, like Scrapper Blackwell, Blind Willie McTell. The blues is a healing moan sometimes, Sometimes it's the heart's own balm. I gather what little I have with me into the black plastic bag and head back out into the night. At the camp, I clean myself up and wash the 2 glasses and put them away before I drive through the deep woods out to the main road. Back in town, I stop to lower the ragtop before I cross the river, heading for T-Bones, placing the straw boater on the back of the seat so that it blows off over the deep water just as I reach the apex of the bridge. Someone will find it waterlogged downstream in the next few days. Divers will search and search the dark water, looking for a legend they will never find. The story Bluesville was published in the 2010 collection Undeniable Truths and is read here by permission of the author. We hope you don't keep Alabama Aloud all to yourself. Subscribe to our podcast and share it with a friend. Better yet, write us a review in the iTunes store. It helps other people find the podcast. Alabama Aloud is a production of Troy Public Radio and produced by Austin Toy and Kyle Gassett. Special thanks to Matt Clower, Buddy Johnson, Michelle Mowry, and Jennifer Horn. Alabama Aloud is made possible in part by a grant from Alabama State Council on the Arts. So, until next time, when you'll hear more of Alabama Read Aloud, I'm Don Noble. Thanks for listening.